comply with the governor's social distancing orders and consistent with guidelines from the state attorney general, this event will only be available to the public via live stream on the Central Consolidated School District YouTube channel. Good evening, everyone. We'll begin this evening. Call the meeting to order. Ms. Haskey?
Here.
Mr. Montoya?
Present.
Ms. George? Christina, what's her last name?
Aspis.
Miss Aspis? And myself, we have a quorum. We'll begin with, we'll continue with reports. Discussion of CCSD redistricting by Brad Morrison. Mr. Morrison?
Hello, Mr. President, members of the board. Thank you for having me again tonight. I need to share my screen. I think Ms. Ray will allow me to share. Yep, I've got it. So the last time I presented to the board, I went over all of the principles of redistricting and talked about a lot of the legal stuff as far as what we're expected to do with redistricting. And I'm not going to go over that again. I just wanted to go straight into the maps tonight and just recap what we presented last time as far as the maps are concerned. And then I'll be open for any questions at that point. So I hope you can see on my screen the current district map. I assume you can.
Yes, it's available.
Perfect. As I stated last time, the most important thing here is that table to the right that shows the population figures for each of the districts. And as you recall, we have to stay within plus or minus 5% of that ideal population for each of the districts. And as you can see here with your current board member districts, District 1 is too small. It's at negative 6.0%. It's 356 people below the ideal population. The other districts are within the range of plus or minus 5%. But as you know, if we make changes to District 1, it can affect other districts. And remember, when you look at these maps, the blue dotted lines represent the chapter boundaries. What you're looking at as far as the districts are concerned are the color fill shaded areas. You can see District 1, District 2, 3, 4, and 5. And just remember the blue dotted lines are the chapter boundaries. So I'm going to skip over the current maps. We can look at them briefly. We can go back to them if we need to. But what I want to do is go straight into what we call Concept A. And just to remind you, we always start with a concept that tries to change the least amount of people as possible, make the fewest changes possible. That doesn't mean that it's the best plan, but it's always something that we start with every client that we work with. It's just a plan that tries to change as little as possible. And that's what this Concept A is. As you can see the table on the right, all of the deviations now, the population deviations are within that plus or minus 5%. And in this concept, we only make one minor change in the Kirtland area, the Kirtland-Fruitland area. And it's 381 people are moved between Districts 1 and Districts 4. So what I'm going to do is, since nothing else changes throughout the school district other than in that area, I'm going to go directly to that map and show you where that change occurs. This is the larger map of that area. You can see District 1 in the north here, District 4 in the south. And what we're going to focus on here is this precinct 23, which is right in this area here. And I'll just go to the next map. On the bottom map here shows the current configuration. In precinct 23 right now is currently split between districts 1 and districts 4. This area right in here is part of precinct 23, which is this whole area south of 64 and north of Road 6100. So in this plan, what we do is we take that area, the rest of precinct 23, and we move it from district 4 into district 1 to balance out the population deviations. That is the only change from your current plan in this concept A. I just got it. They made me the host, and I just allowed a couple of people into the meeting. I hope they made it. In fact, Miss Aspis just joined. The next concept is what we call the NNHRC concept. This was provided to us by the Navajo Nation Human Rights Council. And what it does is District 1 moves south into the Nananazad area, the San Juan Nananazad area. District 4 moves south all the way down to the White Rock area. And District 2 pushes further into the city of Shiprock, the town of Shiprock. And then 3, as you can see here, is this whole northern area. And what I want you to recall is that the numbers here were flipped between 2 and 3 because of where the incumbents now are in this configuration. And I'll show you the zoomed in area of that map as well. So this is the Shiprock and Kirtland area map. The red stars represent where the current incumbents live. You can see one here in District 4, one here in District 1, District 3, and District 2 here in Shiprock. You might not be able to see it very well, but there's a little red star there. Those are where the current incumbents live. This is the Kirtland-Fruitland area. So in District 4 pushes north. When you compare it to the current configuration, it pushes north into precinct 26 here, north of Highway 64, the main street that runs through there. So 26 goes into 4. And precinct 24 here is the boundary between districts 1 and 4. And these are the boundaries between districts 2 and 3 in the Shiprock area. Oops. Go back to that. So as you can see, what happened here is compared to the current configuration, District 2, this southern district, or what I would call the central district in that area, pushed further into Shiprock proper in this area, north of the San Juan River in this area. And that's basically it. I know Mr. Gorman is here and with the NNHRC, and if he has any comments about this plan, I would defer to him on that. We just put it into our system, and but if he's okay with that presentation, the one thing that the note that I have on here is that this concept was developed by the NNHRC, and one of the things that it does is that the percent adult Native American in District 1 increases from 59% to 66%, and the percent adult Native American in District 4 decreases from 78% to 72%. That was one of the net effects of this particular plan. So, Mr. President, I would answer any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions from the board?
Got a question, Mr. President.
Mr. Montoya?
So with the flip from the districts, and I see where you're looking at 2, basically it's shifting more to the south, and then 3 will encompass up and around. Whose responsibility is it to inform the voters of that change?
Well, assuming this plan, if this plan were to be adopted, the information would be provided to the county clerk's office, and they are responsible for notifying the voters of what district they now live in, and where they would vote, how, who they would vote for. So they would recode the voter file for San Juan County and place the people in the correct board member districts based on the information that we provide to them, no matter what map we produce. But yes, if this plan were to be adopted, it's the responsibility of the county clerk's office to provide that information to the voters. First, they would recode them in the voter file, then they would send out new voter registration cards, which they have to do for everything that you're voting in that area, whether it's the county commission or school board or whatever it is.
So just for the sake of discussion, if we did adopt this one, would the Navajo Nation have a role in also extending that courtesy of informing the electorate within those boundaries for those separate districts?
Is there someone here that would speak to that, or?
That is probably me. This is Leonard Gorman, if you would allow me to speak.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Just a little bit of background information first. The Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission is charged by the Navajo Nation to take responsibility to advance plans such as this one to entities that have responsibilities to adopt redistricting plans. And my office has been involved in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah redistricting activities since the mid part of last year, and we continue to be participating in these meetings, and we associate with the research and polling in many respects in the New Mexico side of the Navajo Nation. So having said that, part of the assessment that we do, as you see the table on the screen, it doesn't include the Native American voting age population. Your school district is predominantly Native American area, and I venture to guess that 90% of the land area itself is indigenous lands. And then the population figures are predominantly Native Americans. So as we look at these plans, we assess the Native American voting age population predominantly. And we look at packing and unpacking Native American voting age population in districts. So we do see that there's an opportunity to look at, as you see the rendition on the map, districts 1 and 4. District 1 has the benefit of gaining additional Native American voting age population at the 66% level versus the 50+% level that's been a part of the dynamics of redistricting in this school district for decades. So there's an opportunity here for Native Americans to have a robust district that they can be able to say that they elected a candidate of their choice based on the Voting Rights Act of the federal government. So to the question, yes, we're more than willing to be of assistance to communicate with communities in this area. We work heavily with the Shiprock chapter, and I think we haven't gone to the Shiprock chapter yet, but I think they will love this plan, which District 2 is predominantly the Shiprock chapter. It has enough population in the school district to make one district. So again, to the question, yes, we're more than willing to help. Thank you.
Present.
Mr. Montoya.
Okay, so to that response, Mr. Gorman, I appreciate that because obviously it's a daunting task, as you all know, to inform people of the shift and change, especially when it comes to these, dare I say, smaller elections, but certainly have a huge implication on the change or the shift. But I say that because 4 years ago, there was quite a few people that came up to me and went to vote, but they could not vote for me because they didn't realize that they weren't in the proper voting district to do so. So that's really where my concern comes from, is the adequate time frame and certainly the effort, due diligence that is going to be applied both from the county and the Navajo Nation to inform, because obviously, as you can see in District 1 through the NNHRC's concept, that it pushes further south to the southwest. And then again, when you see the flip and the change in District 3, that's a wraparound that never did occur, which would go out to Clabito and into Red Valley, which again is in my opinion, a huge shift. And then in District 2, that shift to the south, which had not been part of that district up to that time. So there's going to be a lot of voters who are going to have to be informed to understand exactly, and in particular to for and to whom, what district they're going to be voting on. So that's why I say I know it's going to be a daunting task to be able to try to inform all that electric on that shift and change. Thank you.
Board President.
Ms. Aspas.
So, Mr. Gorman, my question is, well, when this thing first came about, and some of the things that were said in prior meetings was how the census was used, and then on top of that, apparently there's a multiplier when it concerns primarily minority areas. And I asked the question then it was said that that multiplier was not used, and I asked the question why, and I never got an answer. And so I don't know enough to ask what pertinent questions I need to, and other than what was presented before, and why wasn't it not treated the same way. And but I do know that there's been lawsuits filed, and then accusations of catering to incumbents, and then I believe there's one district that has a lawsuit, and I don't know the reason behind that, but that went to the Supreme Court. And but I know there's been questions, and people are not happy with it, and just from looking at the maps presented, and I don't like it. I got a taste of it when I ran for state representative and got to see where my district was as far as legislatively, and I didn't like it. It was confusing, and I think too. I think the biggest thing is um, and I say this very respectfully, and but the ones that are redrawing are not even from here, and I think that's the biggest thing, and that's why it's the looking at the lines or the different districts. It's apparent that yeah, where people are coming from the outside and redrawing district lines, and it just makes no sense, and it doesn't look right. Thank you.
Any other comments?
May I comment? This is Leonard Gorman.
Go ahead.
To the points that are raised, my office is also a member of the New Mexico Redistricting Task Force, and we've been a part of their meetings for a good almost 2 years now, and we continue to participate in their meetings. This is a statewide group that has come together, and many of the members are members of the state legislature too. And the paramount concern in that group is how redistricting is for the incumbent. And all of the members of the group and are essentially pointing out that the redistricting is for the voters. It's not for the incumbent. And that's been a part of the dialogue and the discussion among, I would venture to guess, about maybe 20, 25, 30 people that are members of the task force. And we issued a report back in December of 2020, which was used to establish the New Mexico Citizen Redistricting Commission. And that commission played a very important role during the 2021 redistricting activities in New Mexico for the congressional, House, Senate, and education districts. So coming from that arena, there are very important principles to consider. One, the precinct boundaries. We do not agree with the method that New Mexico uses because their method is that you have to use precinct boundaries to redistrict. And I like the idea here that to a degree that chapter boundaries also be respected. Our office has been very a strong advocate to consider chapter boundaries because chapter boundaries are the political boundaries on an Navajo Nation. And the legislature agreed with us back in the January to April or May session in 2021, and they passed the Senate Bill 304. In that bill, they said that redistricting should also incorporate chapter boundaries and indigenous boundaries. So that's saddled with the responsibility, as Mr. Morrison said, the county clerk. Our office tried to work with the county clerk. McKinley County did a very good job in realigning the the precinct boundaries with the chapter boundaries. That's great. On the San Juan County side, it was a challenge. And you'll see at the bottom of District 2, that straight line that represents the precinct boundary that has been developed by the county clerk and approved by the county commission. We only wish that the counties would respect the chapter boundaries, because it really hinders Navajo voting strength in the state elections, and it causes some tremendous disenfranchisement of Navajo voters. So I'm just illustrating to you things that are challenging, that have been in existence for decades, if not centuries, since the states allowed Native Americans to participate in voting. Now, this plan here is attempting to reflect two different boundaries. One, the chapter boundaries, the precinct boundaries, and also the predominant Native American population. We believe with this plan that it balances out the Native American voting age population among all the 5 districts. Yes, districts 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 5 are predominantly on the Navajo Nation. It's going to be very difficult to unpack the Native American voting age population in these 3 districts. It'll be in the 90 percentile. We wish that we could work it out and where that all of the 5 districts would be somewhere in the 80 percentile. That can be achieved. However, you have to split precincts in order to achieve that. So those are the dynamics of redistricting that we face. So we believe that this plan that we're showing on the screen creates and respects communities of interest by chapters on the Navajo Nation part. And it also has an opportunity to increase Native American voting age population in District 1, which is unpacking the neighboring districts to share the Native American voting age population with District 1. And then it's compact. There's no issues of donut holes in these plans. They're contiguous all the way around. So it satisfies those redistricting principles. So all we want to hear from the school board here is as to why you believe this totally violates the Voting Rights Act of the United States. We believe it totally conforms with the Voting Rights Act. Thank you.
May I speak?
You may.
So, again, I'm going to say that I don't know where you come to that conclusion that I'm against voters, and it's not that. I said before, I don't know enough about this to even form a viable question, other than going on what was presented and what was said prior, and then just reading what's been in the news. And then I can't remember the lady's name from your office, made it to the legislative committee meetings and also brought that issue up. And so if somebody's attending a legislative meeting with concerning Indian Ed Committee and Indian Affairs, then I'm sure that's something that raises a flag. However, but in the public mapping, how many maps did you accept? Ideas, suggestions? And then from what organizations? Was it just legislative, or I feel that if this was going to come before us, and then why weren't we given a chance to present a map of our own?
Ms. Aspis, this is Brad Morrison with Research and Polling. I'm not sure if that question was for me or for Mr. Gorman. And I'm not sure if you're asking about maps for the school board redistricting or if you're now referring to the state legislative redistricting. Can you clarify that?
School board.
The school board, okay. So as far as the two concepts that we're presenting here, we were under contract to produce two plans. And so we created concept A, and then we reviewed and input the plan from the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission. And we reviewed that plan. First of all, we would not have shown the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission plan if we did not think it met the 5 basic principles of redistricting. If we had an issue with it, if our staff had an issue with it, we would have brought that to their attention prior to showing it to you. We input it into our system and found no issues with it as far as meeting the 5 principles of redistricting. So the answer is we were under contract to produce two. I suppose anybody could have submitted a plan separately for consideration. Then it would be up to the board to decide which plans would be presented, and then ultimately which one is to be adopted. So these are the two plans, though, that we chose to show you a minimal change plan, which is concept A, and then this Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission plan or concept after we input it and reviewed it. Not sure if that answers your question, but
No, it doesn't. Thank you, though. May I, Board President?
You may.
So, I'm going from the task force and what, I guess they put out recommendations, and so on there, I believe this is page 20 of that paper, and it talks about how minority positions, that's how it's additional ideas, minority positions, and it talks about redistricting maps submitted by the public using an online map drawing tool, except only maps that are developed by coalitions and other organizations. So I'm wondering, and that was my question, how many organizations or what organization submitted these maps here? Was it just legislative? I mean, if it's supposed to come to the public and the public, are we just supposed to rubber stamp it and not ask questions? That's the feeling I'm getting here, and then why it's being given a deadline as well. But I'm the type of board member that wants to represent my constituents and ask these type of questions. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm not sure if I can provide any more insight on that. It sounds to me that possibly Ms. Aspis is referring, when she's talking about a citizen input or drawing their own plans, that was an option that was provided to the citizens of New Mexico for state legislative redistricting and for the congressional districts in New Mexico. But that's completely separate from any local school boards or city councils or county commissions. That was, never an option, or it wasn't provided at the state level to local school boards, city councils, county commissions, or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I can provide any more clarification on that, but.
Yeah, that's interesting because knowing that was available to the public, and yet I didn't hear about it until I ran for the office, and and then now as a school board member, I'm hearing about it and having some say in some of this, but it's really not for the school board. So I'm confused, and again, I I'm just reading from the additional ideas and doing in redistricting, and so also the question about the multiplier, why was that not used?
And I remember, I think, Ms. Aspis, you asked a question about that in the very first meeting that we held. And I think you were referring to something that maybe Mr. Gorman had stated. And I wasn't clear on that, but I think my understanding was that you were asking about the undercount among minorities, or the possible undercount of minorities in the census. And that's a federal decision to decide whether or not they want to adjust for that undercount, if there is one. I don't know if Mr. Gorman would want to speak on that at all, but I think that might be what Ms. Aspis is asking as far as the undercount. But that's a federal issue that we don't really have any say on at the state level, or even especially the local level.
Okay, yes, that was what I was asking, and it didn't come from Gorman; it came from yourself. And
Oh,
and this is the first time I'm in a meeting with Gorman on this matter. But anyhow, yes, I was wondering why that multiplier wasn't used, and as you said or put for the undercount, and and it'd be nice to know. I mean, we are a minority community, and you said it's been used before, and why was it not used this time? And I think that's important if you're applying different multipliers or formulas to a census. It'd be good information to know.
I don't know if Mr. Gorman wanted to say something. He unmuted himself, but
May I say something, Mr. Chair?
You may.
Okay. Listening to the comments and the conversation here in the board meeting, on the statewide New Mexico redistricting activities, it became very evident right after the 2020 census, when the initial data was released by the U.S. Census Department, and this was back in, I want to say somewhere in August, because it was very late when they released the data, 2020 census data. It became very apparent that San Juan County in New Mexico was the county that experienced the most decreased population from 2010 to 2020. And across the board, with the pandemic in 2020, there were very serious concerns by the legislature in New Mexico that there are elements of undercounting that has occurred specifically on indigenous lands. And that's where in the legislation that they passed, Senate Bill 304, I'm not sure if this is the multiplier effect issue, that they legislature passed the bill noting that it would only consider the 10% deviation. And it was specifically noted in a meeting with the legislature in the past, as I was one of the presenters to the legislature, that the 10% deviation is not specifically tied to the +5 and the -5 range. And like Senator pointed out, that we reference it as a sliding deviation. So the point was that, okay, we could have a +3 to a -7 deviation, which is outside the -5 limits that states normally exercise. So in the case of New Mexico, across the state of New Mexico, for the Senate, the House particularly, and then parts of the education, we have deviations that fall below the -5%. And that was taken into account, the undercount on indigenous lands and the population decrease, particularly in San Juan County. So we were happy to work with that. Although it's still 10% range, it was referred to as a sliding deviation. And that deviation for the Senate, House, and the representative is +3 to -7. That was the range. So it was still a 10% spread. So I'm not certain whether legally boards, school boards are permitted to utilize that sliding scale. Now, to the point about public participation, the New Mexico Redistricting Task Force, then which turned also to the attention to the New Mexico Citizen Redistricting Commission. Both parties really wanted citizen participation, and they made it available to citizens across the state of New Mexico, online software in which citizens can draw maps and present maps to the state system, the Citizen Redistricting Commission. So they entertained a lot of different plans for the state House and Senate plans and the congressional plans. And for us, we participated in the sessions, and the northwest quadrant was the place where we concentrated on for our office. But we also did a statewide education plan, and our statewide education plan was, with some adjustments here and there, adopted by the legislature and signed into law by the governor of the state of New Mexico. So in that sense, many of our cohorts across the country refer to the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission as the expert in indigenous redistricting activities. Thank you.
Mr. President, I agree with everything that Mr. Gorman just stated. And just to be clear on when he's talking about the deviations, when I talk about ±5%, that's the overall 10% that he's referencing. For the state legislative redistricting, we were allowed, based on that new legislation, to have that sliding deviation, like Mr. Gorman stated. But there is no legislation that was passed that would allow school boards or city councils or county commissions to utilize that same sliding deviation scale. It's pretty clear in state statutes. And again, just to reiterate, I'm not an attorney, but we work regularly with redistricting attorneys and the state of New Mexico. There is no, we are bound to the ±5% when it comes to local redistricting to the school boards, the city councils, the county commissions, etc.
Thank you. Ms. Aspis, does that clarify if not satisfied?
Well, I still, like I said, I have no background in this, so this is all new to me, other than what I read and what I hear. Was there other presentations done with other school boards, such as Farmington, Gallup? May I ask?
What's the question exactly? I mean, research and polling was contracted to do. I was the consultant for Farmington and Bloomfield schools, both.
Yeah, so well, particularly Gallup, because their district kind of mirrors ours. And was there a presentation done with them?
I don't know the status of Gallup schools. I'm not sure if one of our staff may have done Gallup. I'm not sure about that, but I know that I didn't do that. But this process that you're going through right now is the typical process for any local elected board, commission, council. This is pretty much there are some commissions or councils might ask for, they'll contract, they'll say, we want to see 3 different options. It's rarely more than 3. We usually do 2 or 3, and we've had people ask us, just show us one good plan and hopefully it works. Because, it's based on the price, of course, as well. But yeah, I don't know if our firm worked with Gallup. I don't see it in our system, so I'm not sure that we did anything in Gallup. I don't know. Someone else may have done it, another consultant maybe, I'm not sure.
I was just interested in the questions, if they had any. That's all.
Okay.
And, yeah, I was just interested. And then also, um, you're saying you were contracted. Who were you contracted by? Our district or
Yes.
okay? Even
Um,
that, I thought you were assigned by I don't know, Women League of Voters or something.
oh, I see. No, we went through it's the board, the Central Consolidated School Board, you all approved our proposal. Um, you know, there aren't a lot of firms in New Mexico. There's really only a couple that are specialized in New Mexico redistricting issues. So Research and Polling does a ton of the work. We have multiple staff, and we work all over the state of New Mexico. And so, yeah, and we're always contracted by the boards. You're in charge of redistricting the Central Consolidated School Board, and that means from contracting assistance to do it, all the way down to adopting the final plan to implement for future elections for the next 10 years.
Ms. Aspas, if I may, when this came before us back in the summer that it needed to be done, it was new to me and new to our interim at the time. So we got into our records, and I think we checked with Miss Johnson, and this company had done the redistricting before with the last census, and so we contacted them. Is that right, Mister?
That's correct.
That's why they were contacted, and that's how it came about. And
Hello?
yes, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. This is all new to me. So what if we decide not to redistrict? Is that an option?
It is not, because of the shift in population. We would be out of compliance if we did not redistrict.
Okay, I just want that said.
according to what Mr. Morrison has explained, that because of the drop in population, especially in District 1, and that took the major hit, that necessitated the redistricting.
That's correct, Mr. President. And, going back to what Mr. Gorman was talking about, that sliding deviation scale, if that were applicable to school boards, you would be in compliance based on that. But you're not, based on the way the current statutes are written. And I suppose it is possible to choose not to do anything. But my advice would be, I would advise against that, because I think it would open you up to litigation.
Are there any other questions or comments? And we'll move on to item B, discussion.
Board President.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Aspas, go ahead.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mr. Morrison, and thank you, Mr. Gorman. I just really wanted to, understand and then also, represent my constituents, because I've gotten phone calls and, concerning all of this, and then, especially from the primary, how that all worked, and some of them found out that they were in different districts. So, but thank you for educating us and letting us know, the differences between the congressional and then the school board. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Item B, discussion on commitment of CCSD to equity and education opportunity policy. Ms. Chappelle and Mr. Donovan Russell.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Real quick, on the last item, I know we have a deadline on the redistricting. Can we state what that deadline is again, just so we remember what plan of action we need to take?
I think, if I recall, Mr. Morrison, was that had to be in before the end of the year? Is that our deadline on that?
That's correct. So by the end of December.
And I was also listening to Mr. Gorman's comments, and I just wanted to make sure we knew what his organization's preference was with the options. And I'm not sure that I completely heard that, so I just wanted to make sure I understood that piece of it, Mr. President.
Mr. Gorman, did you want to educate Ms. Chappelle again?
Okay. Thank you, Board Chair. And is it a school board member, Chappelle?
I'm my apologies, Mr. Gorman. I'm the general counsel.
Oh, okay. All right. My office has been involved in redistricting for several decades now, and our government employs my office to concentrate on redistricting every decennial count in the past two cycles now, 2011 and 2021 census activities. So now we concentrate on a unique part of the Voting Rights Act. And I know that Mr. Morse's colleagues have opined on that in several ways. But is being presented in certain, the concept A is essentially just to concentrate on the division of the population as equally as possible, and also not to shift as much as possible based on that plan. That's one plan. That's one way to deal with redistricting. However, our charge is to protect Navajo voting rights. And unfortunately, in many ways, the counties have avoided these conditions for decades, if not centuries. And yes, the bright light comes on to say, whoa, this is a dramatic change. And yes, the plans that we put together that conforms with the Voting Rights Act, if done appropriately, we do see a dramatic change that occurs in the new plans. But keeping with the old way just continues to disenfranchise Navajo voters. So, which is why we've submitted redistricting plans to many organizations, not just the Central Consolidated School District. We made the effort to work with the Gallatin County School District, Sandoval County, San Juan County in both Utah and New Mexico, and the various counties on the Arizona side and New Mexico side, the legislatures in Arizona, New Mexico, and the county in Utah. We have multiple opportunities to engage these entities to look at our plans. So the plan that Mr. Morris shared with you is the one that's labeled in HRC plan. And we authored that plan, and we believe that it satisfies the conditions not only of the principles that Mr. Morris iterated about the redistricting, it also enhances the Native American voting strength in all of the 5 districts. And it unpacks, I think, particularly District 4 to assist District 1 with additional Native American voting age population to increase that number from the 50 percentile to the 66%. So we do stand by our plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm very appreciative of that background. I have no further questions. Mr. President, thank you for that opportunity.
Board President,
Ms. Aspas,
so either Mr. Morrison or Gorman, can you show that map, or which one are you favoring or going with?
So I would have to be able to share my screen again, but there are 2 concepts. The concept A, which is our, what I would call minimal change plan. And then the second plan is the one labeled NNHRC concept. And that's the last one that I had shown. Oh, I have ability now. Hold on just a second.
Mr. Morrison, is there a way to show them side by side?
Yeah, maybe. Let me see here. Let me see how I can do that. I don't know if you can see that. So there are a couple of slightly different views here, but the one on the left is the NNHRC concept that was developed by Mr. Gorman's office and then we input that into our system and reviewed it prior to showing it here. And then the map on the right here is the concept A, which is a plan that we developed with that small change in between districts 1 and 4 in the Kirtland Fruitland area.
So, do we need to vote, or are you just going with the Navajo Nation human rights map?
No, we will, when it comes to possible actions, we will have to vote on it.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Can I stop sharing now? Is that
That
Yeah.
helped me. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Ms. Chappelle, you ready for your presentation?
I am, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead.
And Ms. Ray, do you mind letting me share screen? Thank you. So we are bringing back the policy that we've previously introduced, titled Commitment of Central Consolidated School District to Equity and Educational Opportunities. I do have Mr. Donovan Russell with me here today to answer any questions. We are also prepared to kind of walk the board members through how we got to this draft, meaning internal mapping, review of the graduate profile outcome, and staying consistent, but from a local lens perspective, with the efforts at the Public Education Department and their strategic plan that they recently put out. And I can go through those documents. I can also read again the draft policy, or we can just stand for questions, whatever is the board's preference.
Well, you read it to us the last meeting.
Yes, sir.
And gave us time to look it over. Are there any questions from the board, or what is your pleasure?
Board President,
Go ahead, Ms. Asmus.
so what were some of the questions from the last meeting?
I don't recall questions. I do recall that Ms. Germain reading it to us and explaining it to us. I can't answer that about questions. Sorry.
Board President and Board Member Aspas, I don't know that there were specific questions. We just needed board action on the agenda, and that's why we brought it back to you so that we have board action on the agenda. I hope that helps.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Asmus?
Yes. So I would like a quick overview, Ms. Chappelle.
Okay. The background, what went into this, or of the draft itself?
The draft.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the first few pages talks about what requirements we have from a state law perspective. And so the first component of this is obviously the outcome of the Yazzie Martinez case. And so at the very beginning of the policy, we have a background on what the outcome of the Yazzie Martinez case was and why it's so important for our school district. And so we have that here. Then we also discuss the other multicultural education acts. So the Bilingual Multicultural Education Act, the Indian Education Act, the Hispanic Education Act, and the Black Education Act. And we include the high-level summaries of those acts just so that when someone is reading our policy, they understand what laws we're relying on with respect to the policy itself. Then there's a brief discussion of the Intercultural Community Outreach Department and its role in bridging gaps. And then, of course, there is the discussion of the development and implementation of a strategic equity plan, meaning what specific goals and benchmarks we're going to put in place as a district to actually bridge gaps so that we can show steady progress in bridging gaps. And obviously the focus there is on our kids and our students and making sure that we are doing everything we can to help bridge those gaps. The next piece of this discusses kind of the overarching foundational principles and how we're going to get to bridging gaps and what's important. And so this piece in particular drew upon the internal mapping we did with the ICO, but also with other departments. The goal here would be once we move through this piece of the overall plan, that we take this back to our departments internally and continue that strategic plan process so that we're collaborating and building those crosswalks that we've talked about with the board before. And so from a kind of foundational standpoint, what we're talking about is how do we build a very strong foundation so that at the end of the day, we are bridging gaps on a daily basis for our students. And so that's what this piece does. It tracks in some ways what an IMPED is doing right now in terms of that they're going through a very similar process to prioritize what they do as a department. And so we kind of took their process in some ways and made sure that it aligned with what our local communities have indicated to us that they need. And so that's what this piece says. Then the next piece is kind of drilling down into a little more detail. What are the pillars of that foundation? And so that's what the foundational pillars mean, is kind of a little more detail on how do we create this very strong foundation so that we can begin to bridge gaps and ultimately that we do bridge gaps for our students. And that's what these pillars are. And would you like more detail than that, Mr. President and Board Member Aspes?
I'm good with it.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
You know, I think I know it was said earlier that in the prior meeting this was covered, but we from different as I've said before, people probably joined the meeting because they saw that topic, and to say that we, you know, and just speed over it is we're not being we're not catering to our constituents like we should. So I'd like to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So I think what would be helpful is Mr. Russell, if you would like to maybe give Ms. Aspis a little more, or I'm sorry, the board and those listening more detail, and then I will help as you need as well.
Okay, so we held two different, not different, but the same presentations. We had two public hearings, and at these two public hearings, we did it in all three regions. We did one in Newcomb area, and then we did one here in Shiprock, and as well as in Kirtland area. And so three public hearings of the same presentation done twice. So altogether, we had 6 presentations done at the 3 locations. And so we really did have like a good turnout at at all 3 locations as well. And having the ability to speak both languages, both in Navajo and in English, I was able to give the presentation in Navajo, especially to the Newcomb district, and then here in Shiprock as well too. So we had like just a good response from the community members, and just being able to give this information out to our community members, and all the questions and the concerns that were brought up, we addressed them, and then we went further. And of each of the 3 communities, we developed a core team, and we discussed more on these topics. And so it was a lot of good internal work that we did. And so that was how we did our public hearings. And we got feedback from individuals all the way as far as grandparents and elders who were able to just bring out their concerns. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Board members, to Mr. Russell's point, there were a number of things that in the first couple drafts of the policy, members of the community focused on, or there were other things that they kind of expanded our thinking on as well. And so we went back through all of the comments and incorporated them into the draft. And so essentially the whole goal with the work the team did in coming up with this language was to answer the question, what do we need in our district, and how do we want to go about bridging these gaps? And so from that perspective, it's a very proactive policy that will, I think, help us focus as a district. And obviously there's a lot more work to do in this area, but I think and Mr. Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember, there were a number of folks from the community who said they were really happy to see something like this kind of in writing, so that it gave them more, I guess, comfort on CCSD's commitment to addressing these issues. Did I get that right, Mr. Russell?
You did. And as I mentioned too, it was also explained in Navajo for them too. So they were really happy about our presentations given both in Navajo and in English.
So, how many people attended these, like in Kirtland, for example? The public hearings, how many?
My recollection from the Kirtland showing was the first one I think had more folks than the second one. I don't think there were more than 10 folks in the Kirtland one. Mr. Russell, do you remember?
For the Kirtland one, we didn't really have much who were in person, but we had a good number who tuned in through virtual. So it was about at least 10 to 15 virtual participants and about 5 in person.
I think board member Aspis, the biggest showing, as I recall, Mr. Russell, was the Shiprock meetings.
Okay, 'cause I was there at the Kirtland, and from what I saw was just mainly the ICO, and then for a brief moment the superintendent. So I just lost my question. I'll pass. I'll let somebody ask. I lost my question.
I actually have the data of the outcomes.
Do you want to present that?
Sure.
Ms. Ray, do I give him make host? Okay, I'm making you host, Russell. Mr. Russell.
So we had actually 3 public hearings. So the first one we did in Shiprock back in May, and all done within a week. And so we had attendance in person 13 people, 21 Zoom participants, so 34 altogether. Newcomb in person 6, and Zoom 8. And then Kirtland, we had 6 in person and then 8 Zoom. So, and then our second public hearing in Kirtland, we had 8 in person and then 4 Zoom. And then Shiprock, we had in person 12 and then 6 individuals who tuned in through Zoom. And then in Newcomb, we had 5. And then we had really bad connection out there to have this broadcast on Zoom, so we didn't have any participants that time. And then third public hearing, Kirtland, we had 4 in person, 4 Zoom, and then Shiprock, 10 in person, and then 7 through Zoom. And then out of Newcomb in person, we had 3 parents that showed up again. And then same thing again, we had no internet connection. And so overall total, we had 67 in-person participants and then 58 Zoom viewers. And then so with a total of 125 attendants.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, do you have the recent numbers? From this month?
We've only done it 3 times, which was required in the policy where it had to be addressed 3 times. And so, yeah, so we didn't have one this month. So we did.
Which one was the one, the night of the board meeting? Cause it wasn't labeled, it just said public hearing. That's the one I'm referring to.
Oh, that's a separate public hearing. That's a total separate public hearing. This one was specifically for the Cohesive Act, the Black Education Act, and the Cohesive.
Okay. And then, on some of the, what was presented by Chappelle and yourself earlier is, are we gonna grow the ICO more? I mean, as far as more people? Because I myself, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but, I've been getting calls and feel that it's top heavy. And, so I'm wondering, does this entail more people in in carrying this new equity policy?
That is definitely my goal, to involve more of the community, not only just parents and community members, but as well as all the way down to the student level as well too. So yes, that is my goal, to partner with the community and be more involved with at the community level as well.
Board President and Board Member Aspas, with respect to staffing levels, that would be a policy determination between the superintendent and the board. So we're definitely not here to present on that aspect, but more the commitment to bridge gaps.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other comments or questions for Ms. Chappelle? Moving on to 3 possible action items. A, approve the CCSD redistricting.
So what are you asking? Which map?
You're asking for a
I
motion.
think there was 2 of them.
I need a motion to approve the CCSD redistricting with Research and Polling Incorporated.
Okay. I motion to put for vote on which options.
Board President,
Ms.
can
Haskell?
can Board Member Aspas's question be answered first? I think she wants clarity on which because 2 options were shown. I think one the one that was recommended. So I guess if we could just have clarity on which one we're voting for to accept, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, I don't know just exactly how to word this. I
I
think,
believe, Mr. Morse put it as option A, and then the other one was the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission. I think we can go by that.
okay. In regard to Mr. Gorman's comment about disenfranchising the people, I think that the least amount of shuffling we do is going to cause the least amount of confusion with the voters in the district. That's my opinion, and would disenfranchise less people. I think the more confused we make this, the more disenfranchisement we make the constituents. Okay, option A. I'll entertain a motion to accept the concept A of redistricting presented by Mr. Morrison.
Board President,
Yes,
would it be helpful maybe to put both options back up for the board members to be able to see?
Mr. Morrison, are you still here?
I am. I'm still here.
And Mr. Russell, do you mind making Mr. Morrison the host?
Ms. Reagan also.
Ms. Ray, can you give that over to Mr. Morrison?
Again, Mr. President and members of the board, the two concepts that you see, I'm just putting them side by side, two different documents, but the one on the left is the NNHRC concept, and the one on the right is concept A.
Does that make it easier to understand?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept concept A? No motion. Do I have a motion to accept concept B? And then, excuse me, concept NNHRC.
Make a motion to accept NNHRC.
I have a motion to accept NNHRC. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Haskey,
Yes.
Mr. Montoya,
Yes.
Ms. George,
Yes.
Ms. Aspas,
Yes.
because I accept the, I'm going to vote no on that one. Okay, discussion.
All in favor? That's it.
Yeah. The motion to accept, NNHRC passed. Item B, discussion on commitment of CCSD to equity in education opportunities policy. I have a motion to accept that.
Motion to accept policy adoption.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Ms. Haskey,
Yes.
Ms. George,
Yes.
Ms. Aspas,
Yes.
Mr. Montoya,
Yes.
myself, yes. That's unanimous. Item 4, discussion of board retreat date and time.
Board President Wells, might I?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Superintendent.
So I want all the board members to know I sent an email out before. I've been in discussion with a group to help facilitate both the strategic planning process along with the board retreat for our district, because the board retreat would be pretty much the opening stage of that strategic planning process. The suggestion I received was that because we have limited time, that we could pick a date to have the first portion of the meeting, which would be of a review of strengths of board members and kind of the beginning of the visioning and mission process, to be in the evening in December, and to be able to have people do that virtually, but then in January to meet on a Saturday. And a couple of dates that were set were the 14th and the 21st on that Saturday. And I sent out some possible choices for the virtual session, the evening session, to be December 12th, 13th, and 19th. And those are not just the only possible options, but some that were given to me by these consultants. If the board would like to have a further date beyond that, they would be happy to meet the needs of the board. Again, because of timing, it just would be real difficult to do a kind of a meeting on a Friday and a Saturday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday at this point of the year. So I just want to put that out there, and you're welcome to reject any of that or discuss it and see if any of that works for any of you.
Board President,
Yes, Ms. Aspas,
I have a comment.
go ahead.
So I reject the usage of a strategic firm. I rather it be just the superintendent, the board, and our board attorney. Thank you.
Did you understand that?
Yeah, she had, her comment was that she would not want to have a consultant. She would rather have it be the board attorney with the board and the superintendent.
I say that mainly because there's a lot of things that we need to talk about, and what their plans and what, this strengths and weaknesses. I thought we did that publicly, and so I would like to just get on with what we need to do and go from there.
President,
Mr. Montoya,
I concur with Ms. Aspas. I think that with 5 of us, to include the superintendent and our general counsel with her knowledge and understanding, especially when it comes to mapping the previous experience that she's lent to the district, I believe we have enough to be able to certainly map out and create a strategic plan for the district that would suffice. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a comment in regards to the dates. If we're not going to utilize a consultant, does that open up our options in regards to possible dates in December? I'm not too keen about Monday dates. Things always come up, and so I'm just wondering what kind of other dates are there available for December if we're not utilizing consultants. Thank you.
Ms. Haskey, perhaps you could give it possible dates if you have any, or you might be available.
I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be better just to do it all together, as where you have a Friday evening. I'm not sure. I'm just speaking for myself. It would be easier, like Friday evening, Saturday to all day Saturday to focus on the strategic planning that we're endeavoring to do, instead of breaking it up into 2 different months, 2 different days. A lot happens in those times, and so I would prefer like the January 13th, 14th, just to set aside so that we're focused on that item just for that time period, instead of having to split it up. But if we do need to meet in December, I just prefer not to do it on a Monday, maybe a Tuesday or something else other than a Monday. Thank you.
And I'm good on that date, January 13 and 14.
Any other comments?
Yes, agree with Ms. Haskey. We shouldn't split it. And if we can do it all at, for 2 days, and that 14th that was brought up, that
Mr. President,
Mr. Montoya?
with that consideration for January, would it be possible to take in consideration the 12th, 13th, and if needed, the 14th half day?
What,
That's the 12th, 13th, and 14th. Again, with the Saturday being the option if needed.
in January you're talking about?
Yes, sir. It's a Thursday, Friday.
Thursday and
President?
Friday with a possible Saturday, is that what you're saying?
Sir,
Could I make a comment really quick?
Go ahead, Ms. Haskey.
I just prefer to minimize the dates that I have to take leave. I don't want to take a Thursday, Friday. I would have to I wouldn't be able to attend both days if both days are going to be during the weekday. So I would prefer having a Friday, Saturday, so that I can attend both days. That's a hardship for people who are employed Monday through Friday. Thank you.
That would work for me.
Yeah, I have to agree. Um, the 13th and 14th would work. Cause, I'm trying to watch my leave. So that, keeping it to those 2 days would work for me.
Like I said, that was only a consideration, not necessarily. But if it works for everybody else, that 13th and 14th will be fine.
Miss Ray, what day, does anybody know what day the regular school board meetings are in January? I don't have my,
It'll take me a minute. I think Miss Ray might be able, she's in board docs, so.
It'd be the 12th and the 17th.
Yes, that will be the 12th and the 17th of January.
so it would be 12th, 13th and 14th meeting then.
Well, the 12th, you would be zooming in.
Be easier for people to zoom in on that one.
That Zoom option was just part of my original plan there, and it wouldn't have to be followed. I mean, that's your all discretion. If you'd rather do it in person for that as well. I mean, we can do the Zoom and then we can try to meet, and we do need to talk about a place as well for the in-person portion.
Yeah, I'd like the meeting that's for 13 and 14 to be in person.
And in person where?
On border,
Shiprock or Kirtland?
Kirtland.
Kirtland.
Okay. Any further discussion on the matter?
No additional comments here.
Is there a time set for the board retreat?
We haven't discussed the time yet. Any suggestions on the time?
9 to 5.
Five works for me.
Yeah, that works for me.
Miss
That
Hass,
works. Yes, it works for me too. Thank you.
in person, would you be able to do that?
Yes. 9 to 5, yes, on January 13th and 14th, if all day if necessary, yes.
Miss George?
Yes, it works for me. Thanks.
Okay. Item 5. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
To adjourn.
I second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting. Miss Haskey?
Yes.
Miss George?
Yes.
Miss Aspas?
Yes.
Mr. Montoya?
Yes.
Myself, yes, that's unanimous. This meeting is adjourned.